Welcome to your deep dive. You've sent in a whole stack of articles about end times prophecies.
And one figure keeps popping up, the great Catholic monarch.
Luckily, we've got, no name given, our expert on religious history and eschatology.
To guide us through this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting area. I mean, it's just choked full of symbolism and different ways of reading it and interpretations that have been changing for, like, centuries, you know?
I noticed you even included an article from an Orthodox Christian perspective.
Which I have to say, we don't see that too often, so I was really interested.
To see that included in the stat.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good way to look at it.
Because it gives you a whole different lens, you know?
Right.
Especially on how they see the end times.
Because they did mention that Orthodox Christians don't necessarily
Think about the end times with the same kind of, I don't know, urgency
Right.
as maybe some other denominations.
Yeah.
So what's behind that?
Well, it's because, they look at suffering.
As just part of life. It's not like, oh, the world's ending,
It's part of their story, their history. They come from, like, martyrs and saints. It's in their blood, so.
So when they see prophecies about tribulation and the Antichrist, they're not necessarily thinking, oh, it's all going to come crashing down tomorrow.
Right. Exactly. They might see it as, like, more what we already have.
Just, worse.
Yeah.
Not a brand new thing.
Which makes their take on the Antichrist super interesting.
Because the article really pushes back on this idea
Of the Antichrist as this, like, obvious bad guy.
Right.
Mustache twirling villain. They say it might be someone a lot sneakier.
Yeah.
A lot more
a lot more subtle.
subtle, yeah. I like that.
Right, because we're always so quick to jump to, like,
oh, he's the Antichrist. She's the Antichrist. They even said, like, Obama, Pope Francis, they've all been called the Antichrist.
which, when you really think about it, is just us, like, putting our
Like,
fears.
that's someone we don't like or we're scared of.
Exactly. But it gets even wilder.
They're saying the Antichrist might actually seem a lot like, I don't know, Trump, let's say.
Someone who says they'll bring back the good old days.
And who makes us feel safe when everything feels so chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where this whole great Catholic monarch thing comes in.
Right, because we've got this figure in Catholic prophecies.
Who's going to bring back the faith, unite everyone, wipe out the enemies of the church.
It sounds, I don't know, kind of too good to be true.
Like something out of a medieval epic, almost.
And that's kind of what it is, right? Like, the article even said some of these prophecies.
All the talk about knights in certain places, they don't really fit in today's world.
Right. So how literally are we supposed to take that, like, those details?
Or is there something deeper we should be looking for?
Yeah, and that's just it, right? Like, that's what the article's getting at. Don't get stuck on the little things.
Look for the bigger picture, the themes.
Right.
Because what they thought was going to happen back then...
It could look totally different now.
Exactly. It could play out in ways they never could have imagined.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. You're saying this great Catholic monarch, who sounds like a good guy, right?
Right.
Might actually be a lot like, well, the Antichrist.
Wow. It's like good guy, bad guy, all mixed up.
Yeah, it really makes you think twice,
It does. So how are they alike, the monarch and the Antichrist?
Well, they both promise the same things.
Right.
Peace, everyone gets along.
Right, like fixing what's broken.
Exactly. Everyone's united, strong. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, especially these days, with everything so messed up.
Exactly. But that's exactly what the article's saying is dangerous,
We get so caught up in wanting the world fixed now.
that we forget about the real prize, the spiritual stuff.
It's like we're settling for a quick fix instead of the real deal.
Yeah, like we're just putting a Band-Aid on it,
And I guess when things are bad enough, any kind of fix sounds good, even if it's temporary. Right. And then the article, it goes even further, talking about Nostradamus, you know him.
Yeah, the prophecies.
And Baba Vanga, too.
Yeah.
I mean, are we really putting them on the same level as the Bible, or...?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I don't think the article's saying that, but it makes you think.
Like, even if the source is bad, the predictions, can they still be right?
It's kind of creepy when you put it like that.
Yeah.
Like, even the bad guys can see where we're headed.
Yeah, and maybe it's not that they know, but they can influence things,
Tap into our fears,
Yeah.
use that to make stuff happen.
So it's less about knowing the future and more about shaping it.
Exactly. And it all comes back to choices.
Right.
Ours, theirs, how it all plays out.
Which brings us right back to the monarch. Is he the good ending or the bad one?
Right. Because remember all that imagery we talked about? The knights, the battles, it all feels very...
Medieval, yeah.
So does that mean it's irrelevant now?
Mhm.
Or does it just look different?
Yeah, like how do we even apply that to today?
Well, the article says, don't get too hung up on the literal stuff.
Like those nights, maybe they're not literal nights anymore.
Okay, so like a metaphor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's powerful people, politicians, even those internet guys.
The ones controlling the information, yeah.
Right. They're fighting battles too, just not with swords and horses.
So we have to look past the surface
Yeah.
to the real meaning underneath.
Exactly. Look for the patterns. Charisma, the promise of bringing everyone together.
That potential for good or bad, that's what should make us pay attention.
It's a lot to take in. So, like, what do we do with all this?
It's one thing to talk about it, but how do we actually live with this knowledge about the end times, about good and evil being all mixed up? It really makes you think.
Yeah.
You know, all this talk about prophecies and the end of the world.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
So where do we even start? Like, how do we make sense of it all?
Well, the article, it kind of says the first thing is, like, be smart about it.
Okay, be smart about
Yeah,
it.
like, don't just read these prophecies.
And freak out or take everything literally.
So it's not just about, like, cracking the code of these old texts.
Yeah.
It's about, like, how we live our lives with this knowledge.
Exactly, because it's easy to get caught up in like,
Oh, this guy's gonna fix everything. Like we said, the Monarch.
he's promising the world, right? But that's not the point, you know?
So we can't just focus on fixing the world out there. We have to look inward, too.
Exactly. It's got to start with us.
Which, let's be real, is way harder than it sounds.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you've got prophecies talking about, like...
The Antichrist running around. I mean, who wouldn't want some kind of reassurance?
Right, like, tell me it's all going to be okay.
Exactly. But that's where faith comes in, you know?
It's not about feeling safe. It's about, like, trusting what you believe,
Yeah.
even when...
Even when it's tough.
Yeah, even when it feels impossible.
So how do we know then? How do we know who's the real deal and who's, like, the wolf in sheep's clothing?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
It feels like they all use the same language, appeal to the same things.
Right. It's tricky.
Yeah.
But the article says, look deeper, you know?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. What are their motives?
Are they really here to help, or are they just trying to control us?
So we have to be more critical. Think for ourselves.
Yeah. Don't just take their word for it. Check their receipts.
Which is a good rule for, well, everything, not just prophecy.
Exactly. It's about, like, staying aware, questioning everything.
So there's no easy answer, no magic formula.
Nope. It's messy. It's a process.
Just like life, right.
Exactly. But that's what makes it interesting.
This deep dive has really given us a lot to think about, hasn't it?
For sure.
The great Catholic monarch, is he the hero, the villain? We don't really know.
But maybe the real question is, are we paying attention?
Ooh, I like that.
Are we willing to do the work to figure out what we believe?
That's what all this prophecy stuff is really about, isn't it?
It makes you think.
It does. So what do you think? What stood out to you from all of this?
Keep those questions in mind as you keep exploring. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.